Hello and good morning. It is Thursday, 10 o'clock local time. It is time for PLAR history and geography here at Wasta, and that begins right now. Yes, today is the last and final class before March break. Yes, next week is March break. There will be no classes here at Wausau or any other school here in the province, I believe. So make sure you continue to work on those assignments, submit them. That way, myself and other teachers can mark your work before we head into the break. Okay, so we're at the end of week 5. We're definitely halfway throughout the term for this course, which is fantastic. So today, class, we are going to wrap things up. We're going to finish off looking at lesson number 3 in terms of the history half. And then if we have time in terms of today's class, we'll start the second half, the second portion of this course, which is geography. Okay, geography. Again, like always, feel free to call in, radio in, listen, and participate. Again, get in touch with me, your teacher, Jonathan, if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Again, call me in my office hours, email, Facebook, all the same material. Again, all the lessons and notes and all that will be posted on my YouTube channel. And you can also go to the NNEC archive page and download this lesson again in audio form. Okay? So let's dive right into it. Let's get started. If there's no questions to begin. We got lots to do. So last class on Tuesday, we briefly looked at today's lesson in terms of the Canada Act and the Free Trade Agreement. Again, we're looking at the Constitution Act. We're in a time period of the 1980s in the 2000 period here in Canada. Okay, so this is the very last lesson in terms of lesson number 3. A couple more slides to go through, and we'll wrap things up by looking at women, famous women Canadian in politics. Okay, remember our goal is to look at, again, like always, we're looking at the Canada Act and we're looking at the free trade. Okay, so those are our main topics for today. Again, your learning goals and expectations is that by the end of today's class, you will have an understanding of what the Canada Act is all about, what free trade or free trade agreements are all about, and you will be able to identify key Canadian women in politics. Okay? Then we'll wrap things up by looking at assignment number 8, the very, very last lesson in terms of PLAR history, this history half. Okay, there are 8 more lessons in geography half, but we're going to just focus on history for right now. Okay, so let's start. Again, we started a few slides last class, so again, I'm going to take some time now to go over those slides so that we have a good refresher and that everything's on track. The Canada Act, or the Constitution Act, as I like to know it as. The Canada Act, or the Constitution Act of Canada, in 1982. Again, it was signed on April 17th, 1982. The purpose of the Constitution Act or the Canada Act is that it gives Canada complete control over its own constitution without Britain's permission. Again, just want to emphasize that. Again, it gives Canada complete control over its own constitution. What that means is that we can now make decisions here in Canada without any permission from Britain. There's no more limitations. We don't need to follow or ask Britain, hey, can we do this? Can we change this? None of that is now in play. We can make our own decision as to what we want to do and govern here in Canada. This is why the Canada Act or the Constitution Act of 1982 is significant. Also included and embedded in the Canada Act or the Constitution Act is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Also was signed in 1982 by Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and Queen Elizabeth. Okay, so all the legal rights and fundamental rights as a citizen, as a Canadian citizens, are applied within the Constitution. Hence, it applies to every Canadian, regardless of your race, gender, where you live in, and all that. It applies to everyone. All provinces and territories signed and agreed to the Constitution Act, or the Canada Act, in 82, except for one province. In that province, and if you have guessed it, it is Quebec. Quebec did not sign the Constitution Act. So what happened? So what happened was that at this time, Brian Mulroney, who is now our prime minister, again, a name you probably do not recognize, you probably do not know. Mulroney was Canada's prime minister in the late 1980s. He wasn't in office for a long time. So what he did, or what he wanted to do, or what he wanted to achieve was he wanted to please Quebec. Again, Quebec did not sign the Constitution Act, the Canada Act. So Brian Mulroney, I'm going to highlight his name because his name will come up again. Mr. Mulroney, he created something known as the Meech Lake Accord in 1987. He established the Meech Lake Accord. The Meech Lake Accord had different provisions and outlines of what it intends to do, but the main purpose was with this act was that Mulroney wanted to please Quebec. With the Meech Lake Accord, it basically states and recognizes Quebec as a distinct society in terms of its own province. As you remember, when we talked back in terms of the Quiet Revolution and Quebec separatism, and how Quebec as a province is mainly dominated by French-speaking Francophones Canadians who wanted to separate from Canada, form its own nation based on its difference in terms of economic, political, and social views. So the Meech Lake basically says, hey, Quebec, if you sign this accord or this measure, we will recognize you, yes, you, Quebec, as a distinct society. However, there was a man named Elijah Harper, not Stephen Harper, but Elijah Harper. He was an MP in the province of Manitoba. He was an indigenous individual, and he basically fought for First Nations Aboriginal rights. He stepped up and voiced his opinion and basically stopped this Meech Lake Accord from happening by saying that if Quebec was to be treated as a distinct society, why can't we? Why can't we? Why can't First Nations, Aboriginal, Indigenous populations here in Canada be recognized as a distinct society? Okay, so you kind of see the conflict and issue going on here. If one group of individual is being treated differently, why can't the rest of the minority groups or other ethnic origin groups be treated the same? Okay, so there's some kind of discrimination or unfair treatment happened here. Hence why Elijah Harper stepped up, voiced his opinion, and fought for Aboriginal rights to say, hey, this is pretty much not fair. If Quebec is being recognized as a distinct society, why can't we as well? And as a result, boom, the Meech Lake Accord was never passed and never signed off. Hence, all this didn't really happen, thanks to Elijah Harper. Hi, Sophie, how are you today?
I'm okay.
You're okay? Anything exciting happening in Fort Hope today?
Um,
Not really. How's the weather down there? Or up there, I should say.
it's okay, I guess.
Is
Next
it?
week now, I guess.
Oh, okay. That's good to hear. Again, Sophie, thanks so much for joining in terms of today's class. We're at the end of lesson number 3. We're wrapping things up in terms of the history half. Okay, so again, at the end of today's class, I'll be going over a question on assignment number 8. And like I said last time, all you need to do, Sophie, is complete the history half. You don't necessarily need to do the geography half if you don't want to. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So you're pretty much almost done. Okay, Sophie, you're almost done. Do you have any
Yeah.
questions? Do you have any questions in terms of any materials or assignments, Sophie?
Um, I just, I'm just still stuck on question. I mean, assignment 4, but I mean, I'm not stuck on it. So.
Well, okay,
I haven't completed, but I completed most of my other assignments.
okay. So just, are you stuck on assignment 4, or are you just still working on assignment number 4?
I'm still working on it.
Okay, that's good to hear. Well, keep working on it. And if you do become stuck or confused or don't know what to do in terms of assignment 4, just let me know. Okay, just let me know. If a question doesn't make sense or you need clarifications or whatnot, just let me know. Okay, we're here live on air, which is great. You're in class, so we can talk about it right now. Again, if you decide to work on it later, just send me a Facebook message on any questions you have. Okay, Sophie?
All right.
All right. So I'm going to continue looking at a lesson, and then we'll get to questions on assignment 8 very, very shortly. So let's move and look towards free trade. Let's make a trade. But our main goal is to look at NAFTA. NAFTA, capital N, capital A, capital F, T, A, NAFTA. Okay, which stands for North American Free Trade Agreement. Okay, North American, which is Canada, United States, and Mexico, free trade agreement. It's basically an agreement in terms of making trades back and forth. So NAFTA was signed and established in 94 when Mr. Maroney, our Prime Minister, was still in office. Again, North America, this is an agreement between Canada, us, we, Canada, our neighbor down south, the United States, and their neighbor down south, Mexico. These three countries. So I'm going to highlight these three countries. So make sure you know not just Canada, United States, but Canada, United States, and Mexico. Okay, in terms of NAFTA. Again, basically, it sounds like what it sounds like. It's a free trade agreement where the goal of NAFTA is to trade goods and items and resources back and forth between the three countries without paying taxes. Yes, no one likes to pay taxes. Taxes are expensive. It's not fun. No one likes it. Hence why we have something called NAFTA, where we can get goods and items from other countries without paying taxes, or trying to eliminate as much restrictions on taxes as possible. Sound great, doesn't it, right? Sounds awesome. However, some people supported NAFTA and some didn't. Okay, so just keep that in mind. There's always good and bad, pros and cons to everything. Can't please everyone. Some people love it, some people don't. That's just the way it is. Um, the reason why some individuals or people don't necessarily agree with NAFTA is that businesses here in Canada or United States tend to move towards Mexico. Okay, because in Mexico they can produce their product at a much cheaper rate. Okay, they can pay workers in Mexico at a much cheaper rate than compared to here. So why not ship our supplies to Mexico and they can pay them cheap to produce our goods? Okay, that's not a problem as we kind of lose jobs here in Canada, for example. Another negative consequences of NAFTA that some people argue is that American companies tend to operate in Canada. Okay, hence because of the stronger American dollar. If you're following along with the Canadian dollar nowadays, it's not the greatest. I believe last month we were in like the 68 or 69 cent. I believe today we're around 73 or 74 cent in terms of the Canadian dollar. So not too strong in terms of the Canadian dollar, but with that being said, it just means that the American dollar is worth more. Hence why American companies tend to operate here in Canada, and Canadian companies and corporations tend to lose out. Again, because of all that factor, it leads to American influences here in Canada. Okay, we kind of talked about that before in terms of NORAD, in terms of American influences in Canada, hence why a lot of American businesses operates in Canada nowadays. So we see it nowadays in terms of shopping, grocery stores, and other businesses as well as they operate here in Canada. Okay, so we do have a strong link to our neighbor down south, Americans. We have a lot of influence based on them. So that's another reason why not a lot of people tend to agree with NAFTA in terms of this free trade agreement. Okay, but for this, in terms of right now, just remember what NAFTA stands for, which is North American Free Trade Agreement, and which countries are a part of this agreement: Canada, United States, and Mexico. Okay, we'll look more in terms of NAFTA in terms of the geography we have. This is just a brief synopsis of what free trade and NAFTA is all about, but we'll dig more into it when we look into the geography we have. So let's take some time now and look at some indigenous Canadian history during this time period. Again, this is not in your textbook, okay? The textbook does not talk about indigenous content or how First Nations play a role in terms of establishing Canadian identity. Hence why I'm doing it right now here in class. Okay, so indigenous in the 1980s to the present, which is nowadays. Okay, so let's look at where and how First Nations population identity have progressed and changed as time moved on. Aboriginal voice. Aboriginal voice. Nowadays, especially starting in the 80s, a lot of public awareness. They're starting to realize what residential school is all about and what that conflict and what that situation is all about. Okay, prior to the 80s, not a lot of Canadian, not a lot of the public know what residential school is all about. But now, in starting in the 80s, and even today, there are a greater sense of the challenges and struggles of what residential school um, came into play. Okay, so for those who don't recognize what residential school was, it's basically an establishment created by the Canadian federal government where the goal was to basically kill the Indian in the child, basically to assimilate them into Canadian Eurocentric norm society. Um, and as a result of all that, a lot of indigenous cultures are lost, and because of all that, it still affects us here today due to later generation. Okay, it took the government another 20 years. Yes, it took the Canadian government another 20 years before the federal government finally apologized and recognized what they have done. Our former Prime Minister Stephen Harper on June 11, 2008 made an apology, and he said, and I quote, "I stand before you to offer my apologies to the former students of Indian residential schools," end quote. Okay, so residential school has been going on for a long, long time, and not many people knew about it until, again, starting in the late 1980s and now, and nothing was really much done about it until back in 2008 when Prime Minister Stephen Harper finally apologized and recognized what they have done and all that. Okay, so that was something that started to emerge in the 80s till now. So nowadays, indigenous identity today. Okay, today. Okay, how does all that, when you look starting back in the 1900s, how all their influences and move towards, and how all that play into effect today. So 1867, 1867, you may recognize that date as Confederation when Canada became a country. 1867, Europeans, Canadians were confident that Aboriginal people would become absorbed in mainstream Eurocentric or Euro-Canadian society. Okay, that they were confident. They were hence why residential schools came into effect. Canadians were confident that Aboriginal people would become absorbed into mainstream Euro-Canadian society, pretty much living like the white norm way. After about 148 or 150 years till today, here in 2016, has not happened. That has not happened. That has not happened. There are still First Nations still maintain the identity, and the key to that, the key to survival was adaptability. Okay, First Nations population were able to adapt. They were able to adapt. So First Nations in the 20th century, they pretty much learned how to be a part of Canadian society without compromising their cultural identity. They always knew who they were, which is key. Okay, so regardless of which ethnic origin you are, in terms of this multicultural society here in Canada, it is always important to know your roots, where you come from, and your background history. And because of First Nation adaptability and always knowing their cultural identity, it pretty much with a new voice nowadays and helps to tell the rest of Canada who they are and their history. Hence why when we're exploring history in Canadian history, it is important to also take into account Indigenous content as well, as it really shapes the foundation of what Canada is all about. That pretty much um, where it leads to nowadays in terms of First Nations history here in Canada. A lot more awareness of knowing their struggles and identity and culture. Um, it's being established in schools now where other curriculums are starting being taught it. So it's really important as well to know First Nations history as well. Okay. So that's that, a little background content on that. So we're gonna switch gears and look at the final topic in terms of lesson number 3. We're going to wrap up the history half in lesson number 3 by looking at Canadian women. Oh, yes, we're going back to Canadian women in terms of politics. Not just any Canadian women, but women in politics and how the struggles and challenges of women as an individual, as a person, as a gender has greatly changed throughout the years. If we go way back in terms of what we started throughout the term, back in the early 1900s, even before that, we understand and we now know that women were really, really limited in terms of the gender and in terms of their role in society. A lot of women were uh, gender stereotyped in terms of only working in the home, in terms of the private sphere. Okay, cooking, cleaning, maiding, taking care of the children, doing household daily activities. They were not recognized as an individual. They could not vote. They could not own land, um, and all that. Okay, but as we understand and as we learn, all that changed as time moved on. Eventually, due to the famous five, women were now recognized as a person. In 1918, women could now vote. Okay, so a lot of changes. Okay, women were not just being able to work in home, but now they're stepping outside of that sphere, and boom, we have Canadian women in terms of politics. Okay, big name household jobs. Okay, so Canadian women became highly involved in terms of politics. We're looking at two jobs in terms of this moment, and those are the Governor General position and the Prime Minister. Okay, Governor General and Prime Minister. We're gonna look closely at four individuals: Jean Save, Adrienne Clarkson, Michelle Jean, and Kim Campbell. Okay, so we'll look at these four individuals. But first, let's look at what it means to be a Prime Minister in Canada and what it means to be the Governor General of Canada. Okay, so again, just some background content. This is not in your textbook, but this way you'll know what the roles of a Governor General and the roles of a Prime Minister are. So the Governor General of Canada acts as the Queen's representative in Canada and is the head of state The Governor General gives royal assent to pass bills in the House of Commons, signs state documents, read the throne speech. The Governor General also appoints court judges. The Governor General is selected by the Prime Minister, so whoever's in office in terms of Prime Minister selects the Governor General, and the Governor General is in office for usually about 5 years. After every about 5 years, a new Governor General is selected. Okay, so that's pretty much the duties of the Governor General of Canada, where they do read the throne speech. They do sign off in terms of state documents, in terms of laws and legislative and politics agreement that runs Canada as a country. So, and it acts as a representative for the Queen, which is our Queen Elizabeth. Okay, so big duties in terms of that job description of a Governor General. Okay, so let's look at what a prime minister does. In this case, Justin Trudeau, our prime minister today, and what he does in office every single day. So the role of our prime minister is pretty much the head of government here in Canada. Okay, the head of government in Canada. The prime minister provides leadership, direction for the government. The prime minister selects member of cabinets, appoints executive members, judges, and other important key people. The Prime Minister also needs to be able to explain policies and programs that are created and why he or she are assigned to create that measure. Okay, so due to changes in terms of laws and policies, they must be able to explain why they are doing that. Okay, so that's pretty much the role and the difference between a Governor General and a Prime Minister. Some may actually argue that the role of a Governor General is more superior than a Prime Minister. Takes more higher duties in terms of a Prime Minister, as they act as the Queen representative, to actually sign off on the bills and laws that was passed in the House of Commons. Okay, so some may argue that the Governor General of Canada does more than the Prime Minister of Canada, even though the Prime Minister of Canada oversees the whole head of government in terms of parties and its political ideology. Okay, so some may argue either way. So those are the roles of the Governor General and the Prime Minister of Canada. So, as promised, let's look at these four key Canadian women in terms of politics. You will need to know why these four women are important. Okay, because you'll see the name pop up again in terms of a sum of 8. So I'm going to put a little star beside their name. Okay, so we're going to start things off by looking at Jean Sauve. Jean Sauve, and why she was significant. Jean Sauve was the 23rd Governor General of Canada in 1984. What made her stand out was that she was the first ever, and I mean first ever, female Governor General of Canada. Okay, prior to all this, a woman was not named in terms of an act of parliament or a key figure in terms of Canadian federal government. So Jean Sauve, 23rd Governor General of Canada, was the first appointed woman to speak of the House of Commons. She was, again, the first Governor General of Canada. Okay, very, very key in terms of that. Prior to that, she really focused on, well, in terms of the Governor General, she focused on youth and world peace. And she did work for a CBC journalist for over 20 years. So yes, that's why Jean Sauve is very significant. Okay, first female Governor General of Canada, first appointed Speaker of the House of Commons. Okay, again, this is in your textbook, so make sure you recognize the name of Jean Sauve. Okay. Next, Adrienne Clarkson. Adrienne Clarkson. Again, she is also once a Governor General of Canada in 1999. She was born in Hong Kong, came to Canada as a refugee. She first worked at CBC as a writer and a host. And again, she was also a female Governor General of Canada. She really focused on military, the North, and she really visited Aboriginal communities. What made her stand out was that even though she was not the first female Governor General, that title goes to Jean Savard, but Clarkson was the first person of a visible minority to be a Governor General. Okay, again, pretty significant in terms of how visible minority were used to be discriminated has now been changed. Again, Adrienne Clarkson, first person of a visible minority to be a Governor General. Okay, so again, recognize that name and why she is significant. Okay, she was also a Governor General of Canada. Next, third person, Michelle Jean. Michelle Jean. Again, she is also a female Governor General of Canada at one point in 2005, or was appointed in 2005. Like Clarkson, Jean was a visible minority. She was born in Haiti. Okay, emphasized on issue on youth, Aboriginal Canadians, military, arts, and fighting violence against women. Those are her goals and vision when she was in office. Again, also a female Governor General of Canada. Okay, so I can start to see, starting in the 1980s, a lot of changes in terms of female holding key positions in terms of parliament. Okay, and finally, last individual I want to talk about is Kim Campbell. Kim Campbell in 1993. Kim Campbell, what made her stand out was that she did not win the lottery. No, she didn't do that. But Kim Campbell was the first female Prime Minister of Canada and has been the only female Prime Minister of Canada. Hence why that name stands out. Again, you may have said that, oh, Kim Campbell was Prime Minister. I didn't know that. Well, because she wasn't in office for a long time and she didn't really do much to please Canadians. So, again, like I said, Kim Campbell, first woman to be Prime Minister. That's why she is significant, why her name kind of stands out, even though you may not recognize it. So, what happened was that our good friend, Brian Mulroney, who was, again, Canada's Prime Minister, he decided to retire while still in office. So Mooney retired in office. So as a result, Kim Campbell, who was a part of that same political party and ideology, won the right to be the leader of that party. Hence why she was named Prime Minister, Kim Campbell. When she was in office, she really improved criminal code, such as firearm, sexual assault laws. However, again, she was not really popular in terms of Canadian public and Canadians. She really focused on debts that we have here in Canada rather than jobs. Okay, she really focused on jobs. She refused to discuss social programs here in Canada while she was in office, hence why she did not last long when she was Prime Minister. Eventually, she lost in the vote and was no longer named Prime Minister, and that's why Kim Campbell was in office for a very short term. I think for only a year. I could be wrong, but I think for only a year or so. And that's that. Again, what made Kim Campbell stand out was that, again, she was the first woman to be Canada's Prime Minister. First women, okay? And the only women so far. Maybe in the future we'll have another women as Prime Minister. Who knows, okay? Anything is possible nowadays. Anything is possible. Again, we have made great strides. We have knocked down so many barriers against women in terms of equality, gender equality. So this is great to see. This is great to see. Okay, so make sure you recognize all four names of these key Canadian women in terms of politics. Their name will pop up again in terms of assignment number 8. Okay, so make sure you know why they're significant and what you think about these four individuals. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up this lesson by talking about current issues nowadays in terms of today. Okay, earlier this week, and I mean yes, earlier this week, our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that an exceptional women will be featured on the next Canadian bill. Okay, you may recognize these bills nowadays: the 5, the 10, the 20, the 50, and the 100. Okay, we got Laurier on the 5. Sir John A. Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister, on the 10. We have a Queen on the 20. We have Mackenzie King on the 50, and we have Robert Borden on the 100. These are our Canadian bills that we know nowadays and we carry in our pockets and our wallet. But like I just said, our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced earlier this week that an exceptional women will be featured on the next Canadian bill. Ooh, very exciting news. On, on iconic Canadian women, okay, will be featured. And this announcement is expected to be in 2018. So in 2 years' time, we will not see Laurier, uh, McDonald, the Queen, King, and Borden on our bill. Okay, these 5 faces that we recognize nowadays could be gone. There could be changes. Okay. Our current Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, spoke in support, and he said, and I quote, as we know, women are always have been instrumental in building our country, Canada. But it's now been almost 150 years that we have not had a woman on our bill note, with the exception of the Queen, end quote. So, lots of support on the identity of Canadian women and their significance in the foundation of this country. Okay, no offense to all these great 5 individuals on our current bill, but could be some changes coming in terms of 2018. Okay, Canadians, we can now vote. Believe it or not, we can vote and nominate which famous, iconic, exceptional Canadian women can be featured on the next Canadian bill. However, you can't just vote for any Canadian. You can't just vote for, like, for example, Shania Twain or the famous, or Celine Dion, for example. There are some restrictions, and I believe those restrictions are: 1, must be a female Canadian at some point in their time, must have demonstrated outstanding leadership, achievement, and distinction in any field that benefits the people of Canada or in the service of Canada. Okay, they must have been dead for at least 25 years. So we need to go way back in terms of our Canadian history. And they cannot be a fictional character. So we cannot vote, for example, Anna Green Gables to be featured on our Canadian bill. Okay, so very interesting that support what we just talked about in terms of the identity of Canadian women. Down here, I got a picture of a coin, a limited edition Canadian loonie. Then you can purchase that online, I believe. It pretty much recognizes women's right to vote. Okay, we talked about it in terms of discourse. Again, it relates to what we are talking about, but this is the year that pretty much celebrates the 100th anniversary of women being able to vote. Okay, not in terms of federal government, but in terms of voting in general. Okay, as you know, different years in different provinces, women gain the right to vote at different time period. Okay, but all women, almost all women, in terms of 1918, were able to vote federally. Okay, but 1916 to this year, 2016, pretty much marked the 100th anniversary of women being able to vote. So as you can note, class, and see and hear, lots of great significant in terms of strides, in terms of women, Canadian women, in terms of nowadays, in terms of politics and what their significance they have done for this beautiful country here in Canada. Okay, so let's get to assignment number 8 as promised. Okay, your very, very last assignment for this half, for this academic discipline. Okay, so assignment number 8 is out of 16 marks. Again, not a huge assignment, so should be pleased about that. Question number 1, what was the Canada Act? Oh, sorry, when was the Canada Act signed? And what did this act do for Canada? Okay, so the first half, when was the Canada Act or Constitution signed? I'm looking for a date or a year. Pretty much when was it signed? Okay, the Canada Act was signed on dot dot dot. It was signed on this date. Okay, and what did it do for Canada? So again, its goals, its purpose, what did it strive to achieve? What was the Canada Act or Constitution Act do for Canada? Okay, so that's out of 3 marks. Question number 2 on assignment number 8, class. Do you think, okay, not me, not what another teacher thinks, so not what not your friend thinks, but what do you think? Okay, do you think North America, Canada, United States, and Mexico will ever include other countries in a free trade agreement? Why or why not? Okay, so there's technically no right or wrong answer, okay, because it's basically asking for your opinion. Okay, your opinion. Okay, pretty much a yes or a no, then tell me why. Okay, and tell me why. Do you think Canada, United States, and Mexico will ever include other countries in a free trade agreement? Yes, no, maybe so. Why not? Okay. Again, you can't go off topic and be like, uh, no, because I don't like this country, or no, because of this purpose. Okay. You must relate back to it. Okay. So it could be, yes, I think Canada, United States, and Mexico will include other countries because of this reason, the benefits, okay, the inclusion, and all that. Or it can be like, no, I disagree. Canada, United States, and Mexico will not include other countries because of these factors, because of these reasons. Okay? So again, think about it. Again, no right or wrong answer technically, as long as you're on topic. Okay? Again, if this doesn't make sense or you need clarification on this question, just let me know. Okay? But it's your opinion. Okay, your opinion. Not what I think. Okay, not what I think. Okay, but what do you think? What do you think? Okay, again, thinking outside the box, a chance for you to demonstrate your critical thinking. And lastly, in terms of your workbook, you'll see a little chart. Okay, that's out of 10 marks. And your job for this chart is to simply complete this chart. Okay. On the left-hand side column, you'll see key Canadian political names, such as Mackenzie King, Pierre Trudeau, Brian Mulroney, Jean Save, Adrienne Clarkson, and that's it. With these 5 individuals and names, your job and your role for this chart is to give me your thought on each of these persons in terms of Canadian history. Okay? Give me your thought. Okay? So pretty much, what do you think? Again, another opinion question. Okay, what do you think about each person in terms of the place in Canadian history? So your job is to tell me what did each of these five individuals do in terms of Canadian society. Okay, Mackenzie, for example, Mackenzie King did this. He created this law. He did this to help Canadian society by doing this. Okay, or I can say, for example, Jean Savre was the first female governor general of Canada. She was important because I think this, or I support her because of this reason. Okay, or I think she was a great individual because she did this, and I support that. Or be like, no, I disagree with what Brian Mooney did. He did not do this. He excluded this for a reason, etc. Okay? So, for this chart and for these five key Canadian political figures, give me your thought. What do you think about each person in terms of their place in terms of Canadian history? What did these individuals do? Do you support them? Do you like them? Do you disagree with them? Do you agree with them? Okay, what do you think? Again, there's no right or wrong answer, as long as you tell me what do you think. Okay, if you just tell me that, for example, Pierre Trudeau used the War Measures Act during the Quiet Revolution to stop the FLQ. Okay, that's great, that's correct, but give me your thought. What do you think? Was he correct? Was he right? Was he wrong? What do you think? Okay, so a mark for telling me what did these individuals do and why they're important, and another mark for telling me what do you think about them. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, again, if it doesn't make sense or you need clarification, just let me know. Fire off an email, fire off a Facebook message. If you don't have me on Facebook, just add me as a friend. Okay, simple as that. Okay, and that is pretty much assignment number 8. Okay. And that pretty much wraps things up in terms of the history half. Again, for all the students who are working on the history portion, note that there are 3 lessons, 1, 2, and 3, and 8 assignments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, you must complete all 8 assignments and attempt all questions before you are eligible to write the test. I will let you know when you are eligible to write the test, and I will let your DC know as well. Okay, still again, doesn't matter which assignment you're on, just continue to work on it, okay? And when you have time and whatnot, submit these assignments to me. That way I can mark it and give you feedback and let you know how you're doing. Don't wait too long, okay? And then once all done and when it's good, I will give you the green light and let you know when you're able to write tests, okay? So again, pretty straightforward, okay? All assignments, remember details, full sentences, check for spelling, grammar, and all that, so that you don't lose any marks. Okay, so again, like I said, that pretty much wraps up lesson number 3. That concludes the history half of PLAR history and geography. Oh, we are not done yet. We are not done yet. But however, we did have a broad survey of Canadian history after 1900s, where we explore social, political, military, economic, and cultural perspectives. We dealt with and examined issues including political struggles and development, Aboriginal claims and conflicts, immigration, social reforms, regionalism, gender, modernization, and multiculturalism. And we had addressed topics on Canadians' involvement in overseas conflict, the Great Depression, constitutional adjustments, and Canada's changing place in the world. And we have also emphasized the ways in which race, ethnicity, class, gender, and sexuality has shaped the way the lives of Canadian women in terms of Canadian individuals as well. So that is pretty much what we did in terms of the first 5 weeks or so of this course. Okay, and that pretty much wrapped things up in terms of history. History. Okay. Are there any questions right now? Does that all make sense? Or hopefully that all makes sense. If it doesn't, again, just let me know. Sophie, are you still there, Sophie?
Yeah.
Yeah? Are you currently working on your assignments right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. Good stuff. Good stuff. Again, have any questions while we're still on the air? Again, we do have a few more minutes in terms of in class. So again, class, take this time now to work on your assignments. Okay, and we'll start geography after March break. After March break. Okay. So Sophie, you're working on assignment number 4. You said you're done 5 and 6. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you done number 7?
Uh, I guess
So
not seven, then.
assignment 7 was what we talked about on Tuesday in terms of Quebec separatism and a quiet revolution. It was 2 questions, 8 marks. If not, that's okay. So it looks like Sophie, you'll need to do 3 more assignments. 4, 7, and 8. And you'll be all
Yes.
done. Okay? And again, Kyle, like I said, take this time now to go through your workbook, go through your textbook. If you have any questions, this is the perfect opportunity right now to ask. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or any difficulties you may have. Again, we only have a few minutes left here in class. I wanted to start the geography a bit of today, but we probably won't have time. But like I promised, we will start the second half of this course, whether or not you need it or not, um, in 2 weeks' time after March break. Okay. In terms of geography, we're looking at economics, resource management, conservation, Canadian geography in terms of its formation and its landscape, and we'll be looking at global climate change, okay, in terms of human geography, in terms of physical geography, okay? So some key topics that we'll be talking about in geography. A lot of geography is just definitions, so nothing difficult there. And some of the geography topics do overlap in terms of the content that we talked about in terms of history. So again, we talked lots about in terms of Canadian history. We started in the early 1900s, and we have worked all the way up to pretty much present time nowadays, and how Canada as a society changed over time. So very, very exciting. A lot of good stuff there. Okay. Any last questions or comments before we call it a day, class? Anything else, Sophie, that you need to ask or you want to share? Again, Sophie, thank you so much for taking the responsibility and the initiative in terms of coming to class all the time. So that's good stuff, and I will definitely reflect in terms of your marks as well. Again, I just want to remind everyone there are no classes here at WASA in Silico next week. It is March break. Good stuff, very exciting. So a little break for us. But again, continue to work on those assignments. Again, submit them. Continue to work hard. The term is almost done. The school year is almost done. If you are a potential grad and plan on graduating in June, let us know so that we can have a sense of numbers as well. Okay. So again, if there are no more questions or comments, then we'll stop it here for today. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening and tuning in and participating. Good stuff. Again, no classes next week, March break, and I'll see everyone in 2 weeks' time. again on Tuesdays and Thursday, 10 a.m. local time here in Silicao, here at Wausau. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.